Hello and welcome. Thank you for being here and investing your time in improving your English and yourself. You are not as bad at English as you think. You are just stuck in a learning method that makes your brain refuse to speak when you need it. The feeling of standing in front of a foreigner with a blank mind is not because you lack words, but because what you learned was never used in the way your brain needs. You spent years writing, memorizing, and doing exercises, but in real conversations, it feels like every switch in your head turns off at the same time. That moment makes you believe you have no talent for languages, even though the truth is you just followed the wrong path from the beginning. And when you understand this, you will realize the problem was never your ability. The key point is that the number of words was never the real barrier. About 3,000 common words are enough to understand most daily conversations, from asking for directions, ordering food, to simple chatting. That means you may already know almost enough words, you just never used them in a way your brain can recall instantly. When a word only exists in a notebook, it is like a phone number saved but never called. It looks familiar but does not react. But when a word appears in a real situation with images and feelings, the brain puts it into a priority area for use. So, a fluent speaker is not someone who knows the most words, but someone who turns familiar words into natural reflexes. And when you realize that, you will see what needs to change is not your vocabulary list, but how you learned it. What really makes you stuck is not the difficulty of words, but the way you memorized them. When you copy a word many times, the brain only records its shape, not the situation where it lives. A word alone is like an actor without a stage. It exists, but does not act. Without context, images, and real feeling, the brain does not know where to store it in long-term memory. When you need to speak, you know you learned it before, but you cannot pull it out in time. In contrast, if you hear a sentence in a clear situation, for example, seeing someone shiver from cold while saying a sentence in English, the meaning stays in your mind without effort. The brain always prefers experiences over dry data, and when you understand this, you will see the problem is not weak memory, but that your words never lived in a real moment. The deeper root lies in how English was taught to you. When a language becomes a school subject, the brain thinks its job is to get correct answers, not to speak fluently. You got used to choosing A, B, C, D and filling grammar forms, but you never got used to reacting out loud in real life. Scores made you think you improved, while real skill stayed almost the same. It is like learning swimming movements on land. Everything looks right until you enter the water and your body doesn't know what to do. The brain always adapts to the goal it is given, so if the goal is tests, it trains for tests. And when you enter a real conversation, you realize you learned a lot but never practiced what you truly needed. The real direction lies in how the brain receives language from the start. When you hear a sentence you partly understand while seeing the situation, your brain connects sound and meaning without translating. This is exactly how children learn their mother tongue. They don't analyze rules, but still speak correctly because everything connects to real experience. When you watch a simple video and understand the idea even without knowing every word, learning has already begun quietly. The brain likes things it can partly understand, because understanding makes it want to keep paying attention. The more you receive understandable input, the stronger your language network grows naturally. And at some point, you will notice you understand before you even think about translating. That moment shows you're no longer studying English, you're actually using it. The key lies in the moment your brain connects meaning without you noticing. When you see someone lift a glass and drink while hearing an English sentence, you understand the action before analyzing words.
The brain doesn't translate, it matches sound with image and stores it as an experience. Next time you hear the same sentence, the meaning appears instantly because it is linked to a real memory. This mechanism is exactly how you learned your first language as a child. The combination of action and sound makes vocabulary alive instead of dry text. And when a word is linked to experience, it is no longer something you must remember, it becomes something that appears when you need it. This is where the difference starts to show clearly. When you learn through direct understanding in context, the brain forms reflex instead of searching memory. You hear a familiar sentence and understand it immediately, like hearing your native language. Structures repeated many times become familiar to your ears and then to your mouth, until you use them correctly without thinking. That is not memorizing, that is familiarity. Like saying a greeting every morning without learning rules. When your brain gets used to natural rhythm, it prefers fluency over theory. And then you stop feeling like you're translating and start actually thinking in that language. To turn this understanding into real skill, you need a clear practice rhythm, not random study. Start by choosing videos at your level where you can still follow the story thanks to images and situations. When you guess meaning from context, your brain is learning to connect sound and meaning like a child learning language. After watching, return to new words or phrases you heard. At that time, checking meaning or using tools helps more because you already saw them working in real situations. Then comes the most important step, repeating them with a spaced system like flashcards so each review strengthens memory traces. This process is not heavy because you're not learning from zero, you're strengthening something you already understood. When these 3 steps become a habit, remembering words becomes automatic, and when you notice you recognize familiar words in new videos without checking, that's when the method is truly working. What really decides the result is your daily rhythm. When you study a little but consistently, your brain has time to build reflexes. Cramming for hours may feel fast, but most stays in short-term memory. Like exercise, a few minutes every day changes more than one exhausting session and then stopping. Language works the same way. It needs steady repetition to build paths in the brain. After enough exposure, sentences become so familiar that you understand and speak without translating. And then you realize fluency doesn't come from sudden effort, but from small practice moments that seem insignificant. What matters is how content is presented, not how hard the words are. When language is simple and supported by clear images, the brain understands meaning before focusing on words. You watch a video with short sentences and clear actions, and you understand even if you don't know every word. That instant understanding makes the brain want to keep listening, and attention is the key to fast learning. If content is too hard, the brain gives up before learning anything. But when everything is clear and visual, understanding feels natural instead of difficult. And when you get used to understanding without effort, you realize that's the environment where language grows fastest. The real power lies in that simple repetition. When a familiar sentence appears many times in a video, the brain recognizes it as a sound pattern instead of separate words. The first time you guess the meaning, the second time you hear the rhythm, and after a few times the meaning appears instantly. Repetition builds reflex because the brain likes what is familiar and predictable, like hearing a song many times and suddenly knowing the lyrics without trying. Listening videos work the same way, except what you remember is language structure instead of melody. And when your ears get used to these patterns, understanding English becomes natural instead of forced. The key is not how much knowledge you push in, but how the brain receives it. When input is understandable and repeated naturally, the brain treats it as experience, not information to memorize. You don't need to memorize a structure if you heard it many times in familiar context, but dry theory lets you remember consciously and forget automatically. Reading swimming instructions won't help you float until your body feels the movement. Language is the same. It must be experienced and repeated in clear situations to become a living skill. When you understand this principle, you see the key is not studying more, but meeting the language the right way. To speak fluently, you don't need more materials, you need better exposure. When you hear English in real context and repeat regularly, sounds become reflex instead of translation. Children learn to speak not from books, but from daily listening, guessing meaning from situations, and copying unconsciously. An adult brain still works the same way, we just often force it to learn in the opposite way. So when you change exposure instead of increasing study load, speaking begins to come out naturally like a habit, and then you